Hello and welcome to Listen to French, the video channel which helps you learn to listen to French and understand what you hear. This week I want to go to the heart of the matter and talk about why it is so hard. Why it is so hard to listen and understand what you hear in French. I can't promise to provide you with a sure recipe for success, but I think we need to understand the challenge. In fact, according to some people, listening and understanding is nearly impossible. Years ago, I discussed with a university teacher who was bilingual. She grew up in a family which spoke both French and English. Her French was French standard and her English was better than mine. I asked her how long it would take to learn to listen and understand, and she said simply, "You never will. You have to grow up speaking and hearing French. One day you might be able to understand a news broadcast, but harder than that, no." Now, I didn't want to accept that. You and I, we've learned things in school, in university, in professional courses. If you don't have a specific handicap, you can learn if you work. By handicap, I mean if you're tone deaf, you'll never play the violin. But having said that, there is a famous percussion player called Evelyn Glennie who is deaf. Learning is about motivation and hard work. It's an article of faith that we can learn. But it's true that learning to listen and understand a foreign language is a very special case. We can understand why. Learning to read and write French and communicate in French is a matter of vocabulary and grammar, and that's an intellectual exercise. You make word lists, or you use a computer program, and you learn vocabulary. You do grammar exercises, you learn grammar. You have to work hard, yes, but it's not intrinsically impossible. You put the hours in, you will learn. But listening is a very special sort of horror. You get to a stage in French where you have a decent vocabulary, you can express yourself in the language, you understand what the teacher says to you in class. Then you get a radio. You find France Inter, the public radio station, and you don't understand a word. And then for years your French studies will continue, you will get better and better, but your ear for French will improve very, very slowly. And to complete this catalogue of horrors, I've never come across a teacher who teaches listening. They test it. They play you an audio extract and you answer questions which show whether you've understood or not. That's testing, not teaching. And it's inevitable because nobody knows how to teach it. When I started on this odyssey 6 years ago, I spent a while trawling through the catalogue of my university library, looking for academic works on the mechanism of listening, or indeed practical books on learning to listen. But there's very little academic or practical material on how you can learn to listen in a foreign language. The same goes for the internet. I've never found anything that goes into the subject in depth. If you know of anything, do please let me know. Now, why is this? Well, one thing comes to mind. When you learn normally, you go through a graded series of stages. You start as a beginner violinist. You work assiduously for years, and you can end up playing the Beethoven Violin Concerto at the Albert Hall. You start as a beginner learner of French. You work hard. You get better. But there will always be 60 million French people who speak the language better or more naturally than you do. There's one bunch of people for whom speaking a language is natural. They grow up with it. There's another bunch who can work their fingers to the bone. They can never make it to the top. I don't want to exaggerate, there are exceptions. The great novelist Joseph Conrad, for example, was Polish, learned English as a foreign language, but he wrote very beautifully in English. But he never learned to speak it in the way an English person does. There are some limitations we have to accept. I will never, no matter how hard I try, be mistaken for a French person when I speak French. Why? Because I speak English like this, middle-class educated English. And if you speak English like this, vous aurez tendance à parler en français comme ça. Je fais de mon mieux de ne pas le faire. But standard English pronunciation makes it hard to speak French like a French person. It's easier for Americans, who speak in a more relaxed manner than the English. And it's much easier for the Scots. There's a music in the Scots voice that is not far from that of the French voice. But to return to listening, you can improve your ear very considerably. You can certainly get to the point of listening to French radio or watching French telly without being really aware that you're in French. But every so often there will be that little click, what was that? When you realize that a word has passed you by and that you've missed a bit of detail. So let's think about what's going on in the brain. And what I'm about to say is what I've concluded from practical experience, not from anything I've read in books. It's personal opinion. When you listen to a French political discussion, of which there's no shortage on French radio and TV, it's actually got very little to do with words. The brain is not delivering French words to you to be decoded into English. It's delivering meaning, the meaning of what's being said. And it's delivering that meaning directly from the flow of French speech. There's no translation happening. A good example of this is a problem I come across very often when I'm speaking to French friends on Skype. We talk about something, and my friend says, "How do you say that in English?" Very often I find that I know what the thing is we're talking about, the object, but I'm damned if I can get the English word to come to mind. Professional interpreters can listen to one language and translate on the fly into another, but those people are gods. They're at the top of the tree. So what this suggests is there are two sorts of listening to French. In your French course, your teacher speaks French to you at a moderate pace, using a carefully chosen vocabulary, and that gives your brain a chance to translate into English. You'll find the same with the sort of audio magazines where the material is scripted and read in the studio for students at a modest level. And the same is true when you're on holiday in France. Knowing you're a foreigner, the nice French will slow down their speech and speak as clearly as possible to you, and you'll understand. Then they'll turn to a friend, say something, and you won't understand that at all, because that's normal French. And normal French is a completely different ballgame. I notice this all the time when I select part of a French documentary for transcription. The voiceover, scripted, is always easy to understand. It's intended to be. Then you'll get the voice of someone being interviewed. It may be an expert who doesn't have an accent, doesn't speak particularly fast, doesn't use a special vocabulary, but the level of difficulty goes up 100% because there are no spaces between the words. They run into each other. Now, watch this example. It's from a documentary about the writer Antoine Saint-Exupéry. The voiceover is by Patrick Poivre de Veau, who read the news for years on TF1. He is followed by Saint-Exupéry's sisters, who speak informally. That example isn't too difficult. But if the speaker, as is often the case, does not speak particularly clearly, if he stops and starts and makes little breaks or changes what he wants to say in the middle of a sentence, then the level of difficulty goes up 500%. Try this excerpt, where the voiceover is followed by an interview with the singer Céline Dion, who in this clip is very young, very Canadian, very enthusiastic. Now, you who are watching this, you will fall into one of two categories. Those who say, "Oh, I can't understand a word of that at all," and those who say, "Well, that's clear enough, what's the problem?" Listening is like driving a car. Once you've learned, it's easy. It becomes difficult to understand why others can't do it. It's what I call the threshold of comprehension. Up to your personal threshold, you understand what you hear, pretty much. A few words get missed, but pretty much. Beyond the threshold, you're lost completely. You can pick up perhaps the general sense, but you miss a lot of words and whole sentences. Now, let's try a French discussion program where they're talking about the Queen of England. You see, people speak at the same time and they interrupt each other. The principal point I want to make in this video is that we have to make that transition between scripted or very clear speech to the way people speak naturally, and it's quite a jump. I'm going to finish with an example from one of the greatest French films of all time, Les Enfants du Paradis, made by Marcel Carné at the end of the Second World War. I found the DVD in my university library 6 years ago. It was obviously a very great film, and obviously I didn't understand a word. Now, this is what makes the Odyssey worthwhile. To understand and enjoy Les Enfants du Paradis is to have the door opened onto French culture, and that is the very heart of European culture. Here are two friends, members of Le Théâtre des Funambules, talking in a cheap drinking joint and then going to get a room for the night for one of them. The actors are Pierre Brasseur and Jean-Louis Barrault. Now, given that these two great actors have very clear voices, the question I leave you with is this: why is it so hard to follow? The version with subtitles is on the Sans en Français site for November 2012. The link is given below with the other links to the clips you've seen today. That's it for another week. Keep working at it. Don't get disheartened, and à la prochaine!